Welcome to Hope for Recovery, a 12-step workshop, sponsored by the Saturday Serenity Meeting of Eating Disorders Anonymous, which is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they might solve their common problems and help others to recover from their eating disorders. Information about EDA can be found at 4eda.org, the number 4eda.org. Handouts for all sessions of this workshop can be found at edahopeforrecovery.com. And now, here's today's workshop.
I'd like to introduce Veronica N. in Florida, who has agreed to share her story with us today. Go ahead, Veronica.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity for service and to share my story, which is always an honor. My eating disorder started young, as it has with other people. I was adopted when I was 7, and I was taken away from a home where people, my sister and I were in a badly neglectful and abusive situation. And as a part of that, we were also severely malnourished. And so my eating disorder actually started with severe food insecurity. And that's where my obsession with food started first. And I think the other thing I have come to learn by working the steps in EDA is that I, at a very early age, connected my worth to food because I think the people that should have loved me first and most in my life were not able to provide either a stable living situation, both from a physical standpoint, but also with food and security with food. So that's where my eating disorder started. I developed once I was adopted into a loving home, I had lots of food rituals that had to do with checking to make sure around food insecurity that my needs were going to be met. And I think that that's pretty expected. I think those morphed into other rituals as I got older. And in high school, I think a lot of people run into body image issues and start really understanding their appearance and how that works into a social structure. And I was no different from that. And then I would say that once I had a concept of my body as a human being and how that kind of fits in an overall societal construct, that impacted my eating disorder. My eating disorder then manifested, I have learned now, in many ways over the course of my life. I never acted out in any one way over the course of my life. So, I think once body image hit, it was not the first to come, but definitely the last to go. It was, for me, the second to come. I think food insecurity definitely got me obsessed with food, but then the weight and body image came later and never left. And so my manifestations over time dealt with over exercising and in an attempt to stay at kind of the right size. I definitely counted calories. I did obsessive weighing. I did restricting, and I abused laxatives. So over the course of my life, my behaviors manifested in lots of different ways. What I have learned now through the steps in EDA is that in every manifestation for me, my manifestations of my eating disorder were about controlling my emotions by controlling my food and my activity, and also controlling other people. And so control, I have learned, is a large part of things that I'm addicted to that have nothing to do with food or any other substances. And I'll talk about that in a little bit when I get to the step work. I was going along with life in my eating disorder and controlling food and controlling other people's food and growing my own food and being very obsessive about food weight and body image, and would have happily kept going had my mom not had a massive stroke in 2013 and I became her full-time caretaker. And she was very, very disabled. And so it meant that I I went from being completely independent to having a disabled child, in other words. And I could not leave the house for more than 90 minutes at a time because she needed to be kind of constantly monitored. And to me, that was both the biggest tragedy and blessing of my life, because it led me down a path of recovery eventually. And at that point, I lost control of my life. And I've already told you that control is a very big deal to me. And so losing control of that sent me on a spiral of kind of, I think, the worst manifestations of my restricting, the worst abusing of laxatives. And then I was I had directly impacted other people throughout my eating disorder, but very directly impacted my mother with my eating disorder, and how my insanity around food really impacted other people. And so through that, I joined another 12-step program, and I found a little glimpse of relief with this other 12-step program working the steps. It was like I understood that serenity was possible, but I didn't think that I was ever going to get serenity. And then I had lunch with somebody, and it wasn't a lunch because I didn't eat lunch. So it was a meal, but it was liquid. And it was, and the person I was meeting said, what you're telling me is not a normal reaction with food. That's not a normal interaction or behavior with food. And it was really the first time somebody in my life had hinted and mentioned to me that my relationship with food, weight, and body image wasn't okay. And that was after I had been in another 12-step program and done the work in there and felt a little bit of relief. And so I took this person's word to heart because I felt like they were somebody I trusted. And so I thought I would try to look at EDA. And so I joined EDA here in Delray Beach, Florida. We were super fortunate to have 3 meetings a week in Delray Beach, which I know is not like many other places in the country. So I was able to attend a lot of meetings and hear a lot of hope, and also think that I could get better with just meetings. And for me, that didn't work. I sat in the meetings for 6 months. I didn't get a sponsor. Whenever I raised my hand, I would cry. I was a mess. And I think that I've learned that, like, that idea of self-knowledge, I couldn't get better with self-knowledge. In fact, understanding what was happening to me made things worse, because I understood kind of how these behaviors impacted me on a long-term basis and the world around me and my interactions with them. And so it actually made my acting out worse. It made my restricting worse and my abuse of laxatives worse. It definitely made my wanting to control things and my ego much worse. And so after 6 months, I had dropped to, I guess, what we considered weight that was in the danger zone. And my doctor said it was either treatment or figuring out another way to deal with my eating disorder. And at the time, I didn't have insurance because I was a freelancer, and I was not in a position. I would take gigs that would take me away from my mom, but I could only take paid work, if it paid me to pay for her care while I was gone. And so for me, treatment was not really an option that I could afford to do, not because I had to pay for treatment. I didn't have insurance, and I had to figure out how to care for my mom. And so that gift of desperation I had to make EDA work for me. And I had to figure out how to do it. And so my full surrender was at that point. I got a sponsor who was willing to work the steps with me. And I had been through the steps before, so I thought, sure, I can do the steps, no problem. What I have come to appreciate about EDA is the thoroughness that we do the step work, and the attention to our kind of root causes of what drives these eating disorders so that we can kind of address these root causes. And the tie always back to a higher power and understanding that full recovery does not mean full abstinence and not rigidity, but balance. All of that it's how I could eventually get better. So I started the step work with a sponsor. And the first thing I had to see was a manageability, because I definitely knew that I was powerless over my eating disorder. And this program, the step work, so thorough. I did the step work before we had the EDA big book. And I love taking sponsees through the steps now. But at that point, we did things just slightly differently, but not too different. And I really had to see how my eating disorder had made my life unmanageable. I definitely knew I was powerless to stop it or control it in any way. With step 2, I had to come to believe that like I had a secret. I used to call it like a really dark part of my heart that I wouldn't have even been willing to share with a higher power. Like that was my bit that I had a vice grip on that nobody else could see, because if they saw that, I don't know. So I couldn't believe before this program that like somebody or something could see that piece of me and that I would be okay. And step 2, I really had to understand and embrace the fact that like I had to let the vice grip open on that just a little bit and let a higher power be able to help me with this. And I had to become willing in step 3 to like turn it over. And I think for us, the big thing with step 3 is like, I say there's a big step 3, which is the decision to keep doing the step work and the willingness to like move forward and believe that a higher power and a program of recovery can help you. And then there's a million step 3s that I personally do every day, even as a recovered eating disordered. I'm like, every time I want to control something, or every time something doesn't go my way, or every time, no matter what, period, ... whatever that is, I have to do a step 3 and let go and let God. And I continue to do step 3s all the time. Step 4 and 5 in this program is so thorough and honest and really getting to, I call the taproot of my eating disorder. And what I encourage with my sponsees is getting to their taproot, which everybody's is so uniquely different and so very important to our recovery journey. And sharing that with somebody else is just such an important part of this process. Step 6 and 7 for me were instrumental in me finding recovery. And this is where I learned that I was addicted to control and ego. Those are actually my addictions. They just come out in eating disorder behaviors and come out in other behaviors and uses. And so I really had to learn to build esteem through humility. And I think that is what step 6 and 7 are all about. And at step 6 and 7 for me, I was actually ready to call it quits with the program. And they in our program, in our meetings, they call for a burning desire. And I would never do this, but my higher power raised my hand when somebody had a burning desire. And at step 6, I said, look, I don't think I can do this program anymore. I really just don't. It's too hard. I'm not sure I can see it all the way through. And I called the EDA hug. Like my group enveloped me and supported me and encouraged me to keep going. And that's what I needed, because those steps are like, for me in my journey where the rubber met the road. I really needed to start learning humility and building esteem through esteemable acts that didn't have anything to do with me. Step 8 and 9 for me was putting my humility into action by righting the wrongs of the past. And so really making amends to people that I had gotten to the point I'd grown so that I got past the point of not thinking that my eating disorder bothered anybody else but me, and really understood how my eating disorder impacted the people around me, my family and my friends and my loved ones. And then 10, 11, 12. For me, these are things I must do every day to keep recovery. In our meetings, I always say it's the million little things that I have to do in order to stay recovered. So I have to do an inventory, a regular inventory with humility. I have to express gratitude. I have a gratitude group every morning that I say 3 things I'm grateful for. It gets me started off on the right foot. I have to keep a connection to a higher power. And I really had to learn how to have a connection with my higher power in a way that worked for me. Everybody finds meditation in different ways. And like for me, gardening is meditation. And I really have connect with my higher power through the earth and growing things and life. So that really helps me. But I had to get to a point where I understood that that's meditation and connecting with my higher power. And then service to others. I sponsor people and I do service wherever possible in terms of chairing meetings and attending and driving people and all of that. So service work and service to others is critical. This year, my mom passed away, unfortunately, in May. And service to others, I have to say, is the reason that I was able to keep recovery through the grieving process with her. I had started taking somebody through the steps, and we were a third of the way through the steps. And we needed to keep going forward. And that kind of service work is what helps keep it fresh for me, helps keep me accountable to other people that I'm doing the right things that I need to do for myself. But giving back gives me so much more because then I'm living the program, I'm talking the program, I'm helping another person also deal with kind of their issues. And so that's my story. I think to me, meeting makers make it. I work the steps on a daily basis, and I try and help others and be there for others. And I think that's how you can say that you are fully recovered. And when I first came in, didn't think that recovery was possible. Then I was able to live off the hopes of other people. And now I have that hope myself, that I know a bad day does not mean a bad life, right? And that recovery is possible, and that I guess I'll just finish with this. I always say that my life is not 100% better, but I am 100% better because of EDA and the work that I've done in this program.
Thank you very much, Veronica. It was really uplifting and inspiring. I think I heard you say, meeting makers make it. A little slogan, I think, from another program. What's your experience with the importance of meetings?
I would say not just meetings, although meetings are a way for me to reinforce the accountability and reinforce the step work and reinforce the program. But having a home group, to me, has been so valuable in my recovery because I'm able to connect with the same people on a weekly basis and be connected to their recovery, understand their stories. I also get examples of when other people fall and get back up on the beam, although I'm not sure that that's the right metaphor, but like that I can see how their recovery is durable, that it's possible to face tough challenges and still continue to find hope and make the change that you need in your life.
Yeah, we have a lot of people listening to this recording who live in small towns and are like very jealous of 3 meetings a week or however many there are. And I guess it's up to each individual to create their own community virtually if necessary.
Yeah, it is. My home group here in Delray Beach, there's 2 meetings and then there's a 3rd meeting that's separate. And my home group happens to be the separate meeting. And we only had kind of 7-10 people on a regular basis coming to the meeting. And what we have decided, at least right now, is that even if we go back in person, we're going to keep a hybrid model, because it has been so valuable to have other voices joining our group, also becoming home members of our group that aren't necessarily from our little town in southern beachy Florida. It's a beautiful thing for us to have expanded our little group to include so many other people.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, your doctor gave you an ultimatum: go into treatment or get it together. Is your doctor happy with your health now?
Yeah. I don't have any health issues that are weight related, that's for sure, or lack of weight. And yeah, I think the biggest thing that my doctor is proud of me for is that I have stopped weighing myself kind of 10 times a day, that I have much more bandwidth. And so I'm not so focused on next meal, food, shame, weighing myself, all of those things that cycle through our head a million times a day, that like I have the bandwidth to focus on other things. And then that has helped me become a more settled person, a more serene person. And I think that is what my doctor is the most proud of.
Wonderful. I ask a lot of people this question: how has your recovery affected your personal relationships?
It's a really good question.
Including your mom who passed.
Yeah. I don't want to be cheesy and say like it's helped my relationships, but I bring a whole me to the relationship. And so I don't think that and I'm more compassionate when I interact with the people around me. I'm more understanding. I'm less controlling. And so I think, I think that just, I bring a better self to the relationship. So therefore my relationships are better and closer. My mom and I got very close when I was in recovery because I was able to be there for her 100% until her last. And so like, I have no regrets about the fact that like, I was able to recover fairly closer to the stroke. So I had more time with her as a recovered eating disorder person. And I was able to bring my whole self to every relationship. It's like that with my personal life, as my personal relationships, my friendships at work. I'm a better boss to people because I bring my whole self to the relationship, and I'm understanding and compassionate.
Well, Veronica, thank you again. And we'll see you on the EDA campus.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's now my pleasure to introduce Joseph.
Hi, my name is Joseph, and I am recovering from an eating disorder. It's a wonderful opportunity to be doing this, to be a part of this, to be a member of EDA, and I appreciate Regina, who asked me to contribute. The recovered life of somebody with an eating disorder. I was diagnosed actually with anorexia in February, so it is October now. Very, very humbling diagnosis that I received, and in all honesty, I needed to hear it. For many years, I was the type who had shared to people, oh yes, I had engaged before. I engaged in eating disorder behavior. I was anorexic, or I was this and that. And to hear, at 28 years old, no, Joseph, you're anorexic. It left me speechless, but it gave me a little bit of hope, because I finally was able to accept that I don't know what I'm doing with my life. A little bit about what it was like for me with respect to anorexia and my eating disorder. I don't remember much about my relationship with food until I realized I was not happy with the way I looked. And what that produced was so much discomfort growing up, especially as a preteen and a teenager, that I resorted to behaviors that allowed me to escape, even if momentarily, from the way I felt. Not knowing anything about eating disorders or anything about addiction, just knowing that what I was doing in my heart, I knew wasn't okay. Where my disease kind of started and ended in a way was a lot of self-harm, behaviors like cutting and tattooing, to the point where food was starting to get affected, and the way my relationship with food was not healthy, and I hid that relationship. Not to get into many of the details of what it was like as a teenager with respect to the behaviors, but I would consider there was acting out with food that I was ashamed of, whether it be on one end of the spectrum or the other. The relationship wasn't healthy. And that was about it from what I remember, because I found other ways to escape. And as I would come to learn that, just like with every other disease and addiction that I have, sometimes it remains dormant for a little while. And that's exactly what happened in my memory, is that, and why I associated anorexia with something in the past. I found other ways to act out and other substances to use so that I wouldn't have to be Joseph, whoever that was. I didn't know who he was. But I knew I didn't want to feel the way I felt and look the way I looked. What was fortunate for me at that age, but unfortunate looking back, was I was in a very, social punk rock type of scene. And as a man, I could get away with reckless behavior saying, oh, it was punk rock. That's what we did, and looking back, it was very disordered behavior. It was anorexic behavior, or it was addictive behavior. By the grace of God, it did not take me long to find a 12-step program for other problems. And by the grace of God, I've been in that 12-step program for my addiction to alcohol since I was 18 years old. Now, what had happened, unbeknownst to me, was there were other defects that were coming into my life that would surface. And, well, hey, I'm not drinking. I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that, so I'm okay. I got this. Famous line. I got this. And it wasn't until again I became unhappy with the way I looked, because the longer I stayed sober and the longer and deeper relationship that I had with God as I understood God, more was revealed to me, and I realized that I wasn't looking at a lot of things in my life, particularly to forgiveness, whether it be to myself or to others, especially to my body and to what I've done to it and to what I've done to myself. I had a huge period in recovery from other addictions where I engaged in eating disordered behavior and had no idea, because it was a fad. It was acceptable in society to have these types of diets or these types of mentalities with food. And I thought I was healthy. I really did. I thought what I was doing was the best for me because A, B, and C. And I didn't need a reason. I would find a reason. I would always find a reason to behave the way I thought I needed to behave. What ended up happening, as it did to most people, when the world shut down, I was by myself. I lived in a studio in a back house in a city that I'm not familiar with, because I moved to get married, which by the grace of God I did. And I was left with old behaviors and old thoughts. And lines started getting crossed. And behaviors that I thought I wouldn't do, I started doing. And the no-nos, that's never going to happen to me. I'm never going to hit that number. or whatever it was started to happen. And I was a part of another 12-step program for eating, realized if I continue down this path, I might die. And it wasn't until the sponsor of that program said, you need to call somebody, you need to call a dietitian, you need to call a professional. He was worried about me. And I was worried about me too. My heart rate was very low, and I was starting to get concerned looks from people. And in all honesty, it took several months for me to realize that they were right. I thought they were exaggerating. And I saw a dietitian, something I said I'd never do. You know, a lot of resentment against that moment and against that woman who was just willing to help me. And she diagnosed me with anorexia and orthorexia. And I'm a 28-year-old man, newly married, and thought I had all of the answers. I thought I had everything figured out, and realized I do not know how to live life. Because the way I live life, it won't last very long. And I was introduced back into EDA. I went to EDA the first time as support for somebody else, actually. I didn't think I really belonged there. I was going to help somebody else when I was 20. And I went back into EDA, and what I first started hearing was that neither weight, nor numbers, nor food plans, nor dieting, nor any of these specifics is going to help you here. None of these external factors is going to save you. And they introduced an idea or a concept that I had never considered before, which is the wisdom of the body. My life in 12-step programs, and I'm a member of a few and work the steps in all three. My life as a member of 12-step programs centers around the word surrender. The idea that small actions that I would not normally consider doing is going to be required for me to consider that I just don't know how to live. I don't know how to feed myself. I don't know how to exercise normally. I don't know how to be a productive person. And that was the beginnings of my journey in EDA. I can honestly say, since February, when I walked back into EDA, major behaviors with respect to anorexia have not happened. And that's nothing but a gift from God. And I had to consider that, is it possible that this wisdom that I'm going to have to be willing to listen to, is that possible that this wisdom from the body is coming from God as I understand God? That this is going to be the driving force that I'm going to have to rely my future actions on. And I'm not saying I haven't had panic attacks, and I'm not saying my thoughts have been pure. But what I'm saying is that I have been an active of a program that has saved me from dying an anorexic death. I've had a love-hate relationship with EDA, coming from programs where we talk about details, and being a member of EDA, realizing that's not our focus, has been a hard transition. But it saved my life. Because there's some wisdom here when it comes to the complicated, oh my God, the interwoven complications of having an eating disorder is so new. The idea of unraveling this. I can do the same actions with two different intentions. You know, it's a lot of patience. It's finally an opportunity to treat my body with respect, because I'm alive. You know, I'm alive. So this relationship with my body and relationship with God has been an uphill battle, but it has been uphill. I continue walking up. And I pray to God that each and every day, regardless of my feet feel fat today, or my clothes don't feel good anymore, or gosh, I just want to exercise. Regardless of whatever these old behaviors and these old relationships to food and to body image, whatever comes up, it doesn't matter, because God still loves me and my body still loves me and needs me. I have a purpose today. And with that, I will end my share and pray that I'm able to listen to the wisdom of my body and listen to the voice that speaks from my heart, and hope that I can be of any help to anybody out there hearing this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph.
Yeah.
You mentioned something when the world started to shut down, just for the purpose of our future listening audience.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so my where I live, in March of 2020, most of the city and businesses closed because of COVID.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good clarification. Thank you.
Yeah.
So with everything you've gone through, was your health affected by your eating disorder?
Yeah. When I was, obviously, with respect to cutting and tattooing and all the body abuse that I put myself through, there's some sort of health issue there. But I think the biggest was with respect to over exercise. I've had 3 knee surgeries since I was 16, when I was 16, 17, and then 20, because of my inability to know when and when not to exercise, and what extent.
Got it. And they were successful, I hope, the surgeries? And you're able to exercise?
They were successful. Unfortunately, I continued to abuse myself during recovery until the last one, when I was 20. And since then, I have been able to learn through this program what it means to have a physical body.
Beautiful.
Yeah. But I would like to say this, although there is a lot of freedom that I have from that, and that I am able to exercise today and I have a healthy relationship with exercise, I have consequences, and I have to learn how to live with that. And some days are better than others, and remind myself I'm not training for the Olympics, or I'm not going to run a marathon. That there are certain things I can't do that I used to like doing, but accepting that and adjusting my life to what I'm able to do.
You said you have purpose today.
Yeah.
I don't think I heard you say what your purpose is. Can you share?
Yeah. I think my whole life, for most of my young life specifically, I wanted a purpose. I wanted to have something to live for. And I think I heard it the first time in my other 12-step program, and then carries on to EDA, which is my purpose is to fit myself to be of maximum service to God and the people about me. And I can do that by that moment by moment surrender, that action, the contrary action that I've been learning.
Thank you. I was really touched when you said you treat your body with respect because I am alive.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just gonna have to think about that. It was deep.
Yes. Well, it doesn't. What's interesting is that didn't come natural, which is part of the disease.
Right. We could tell by your story. All right. Let me see. Body dysmorphia. We hear that term batted around. Was that part of your situation? And do you still, if so, is it still an issue?
I would say, looking at my life, and looking at where I am now, I am not a trustworthy judge of what my body looks like. Unfortunately, has it gotten better? It has gotten better, and it is not easy. It doesn't feel good, but it has gotten better.
And
Yeah.
yes, I am told that it's a very stubborn issue
Yes.
of the body dysmorphia. And thank you for speaking to it, because I know many people in EDA who have shared that is something they struggle with. And it's nice to hear that it is getting better. Well, is there anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking about this. It is so strange how I did not want to be a member of this program. I really didn't. God, I did not want to be a member of this program. And it's exactly what I needed to be, because I don't know if I'd be alive today, regardless of the other things that God has blessed me with respect to sobriety. It's always, for me in my life, I can only speak from my experience. It's always the one thing God, I don't want to admit this. I'm a 28-year-old male with anorexia. It was much easier to say I'm a 15-year-old punk rocker, with a mohawk, and I missed a few meals, and to look at the reality of the situation, which is I'm sick. No one wants to admit that they're different than their fellows, and that was my case. But thank God that I have anorexia, and thank God that I'm a member of EDA.
Well, to that I will say amen.
Yeah.
All right. It's my pleasure now to introduce all of you to Susan from Florida. Go ahead, Susan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan, and I'm recovered from an eating disorder. So what it was like then, I was born into an alcoholic and dysfunctional home. I was the second child of 7 children. I was constantly moving furniture around in our house, organizing and cleaning what my mother didn't seem to care about. I was nicknamed Susie Spotless by my siblings. My father, an alcoholic, was very controlling and critical. My mother was subservient, depressed, and emotionally unavailable. I believe that my chaotic household was instrumental in my feelings of lack of control in my life. My earliest memory around food was sitting alone when I was 4 years old in my dad's big armchair in Germany, listening to Peter and the Wolf while eating my favorite comfort food. I felt safe. Now that I look back at it, both of my parents had eating disorders. My father was always on a diet, and my mother developed unhealthy eating patterns. I grew up playing competitive tennis at an early age, and my father was my coach. I was good and spent a lot of time with my dad. He was tough, controlling, and a rigid disciplinarian. I lived in fear and walked around on eggshells. I felt that I was the only one of my siblings that felt this way. I developed an eating disorder at age 15 when I was called, "You look pregnant," by a young man who worked at our local grocery market. He was very handsome, and I had a crush on him. I felt horrible, full of shame, and wanted to hide. I went to our car and told my mother, and she said nothing. Soon after that, I decided that I would starve myself until I lost a certain amount of weight. It took me 6 weeks, and then I ate dinner one night and felt very sick at my stomach. I was planning to go to the beach that night with my younger sister, Jenny. When we arrived, I was in such discomfort that I asked her if we could walk down by the shore. We went there with her friend Lila, and I let her know how miserable I was. She said to me, "Just stick your finger down your throat and you can get sick." I wasn't about to do it then, but it planted a seed in my head. Maybe I could try it later. A few weeks later, which was in November of 1970, Jenny wouldn't talk to me and shut me out of her life. She knew that I was purging a lot and wanted no part of me. I understood, but I was already addicted to my bulimia. In January of 1971, I left to play on the WTA Women's Professional International Tennis Circuit in California. 2 days later, I received a phone call from my father telling me that Jenny had been killed in a car accident while drunk driving. I believe that I hung on to my eating disorder for so many years because I thought I could stay connected to her through my eating disorder. My years on the tennis circuit were miserable for me. I isolated with my bulimia so much that I didn't make connections with others and didn't work on my game by training hard. I was floating through life hoping to end my eating disorder, but I had never opened up and told a soul that I had an eating disorder. My shame and guilt had the best of me. I believe I was too young to be on my own traveling the world. I didn't have a coach traveling with me so that I would be somewhat accountable, and left to my own devices, I was buying time until I could stop playing tennis. I had wanted to go to college, but I was afraid of that because of the confinement of living in a dorm with other women who might find out about my eating disorder. I became very depressed and would cry a lot during my matches. But who would I be if I weren't a tennis pro? I had no other identity. I was also afraid of what my father would say after having spent so much time and money on me and my tennis. I met a handsome young man at one of the tournaments that I was playing at, and I fell in love with him. His family was from India, and he grew up in Trinidad and was playing on a tennis scholarship at a university in Texas. We stayed in touch and saw each other over the next year, and we decided that we wanted to get married. I was 19 and he was 25. He was finishing up university, and my father had given us his blessing. We were engaged for a few months when my father changed his mind. My father believed we would have too many problems because of our different backgrounds. I understood what he said, but I was angry with him. A month later, I decided that my father was no longer going to dictate to me in my life, and my boyfriend and I decided to elope. We met in Atlanta with family and got married at the courthouse after I snuck out of my house and had my girlfriend take me to the airport. We got married in the May of 1973, and my husband flew to Puerto Rico to work at a resort and teach tennis. I would continue on the circuit and have my home base in Puerto Rico. My eating disorder was worse than it had ever been, and I became anorexic as well as bulimic. I hid it from my husband, who never ever made a comment about my eating disorder. Out of sight, out of mind. I later had 2 children with him, and he didn't want kids, but I got pregnant anyway. I met my second husband when I was 29 in Stowe, Vermont, and I was also teaching at this time. We married a year and a half later, and he already had 4 children from his first marriage. We then had 2 boys together. It was an extended family with 8 kids living with us. I began drinking and continued my bulimia. I had let my husband know that I was bulimic, and he told me up front that we could not stay together if I continued my eating disorder. I tried so hard to stop acting out, but I couldn't. He was a very controlling man. He was a bully and was abusive. I was miserable, and my children were aware of the tension and volatility in our home and in the marriage. I wanted out of the marriage, but wasn't sure how to do that. I felt trapped. I was in therapy, and I was working on my eating disorder in groups, but nothing seemed to help. My husband then decided that he wanted to move. So we planned to move to Boca Raton in June of 1993. 4 months later, I went into treatment for 6 weeks for my eating disorder. I needed this time to think about my future with my husband and my family and to get the treatment I needed for my eating disorder. In treatment, I learned how to eat on a food plan that I felt safe with, but nothing about how to surrender and stop the urge to purge. When I got out, I had pretty much decided to get a divorce. 2 months later, I asked my husband to leave. He left the next day, and I hired a lawyer. I spent the next year taking care of the children and working on my eating disorder. It was challenging, but I was committed and determined to get my life back. 10 years later, I met a wonderful man who loved me unconditionally. We married 5 years later and have now been married for 17 years. He introduced me to EDA after researching it on the internet. He went to my first meeting with me and even read from the book. I finally felt at home. I could relate to everyone and was so relieved that there were others like me. I finally opened up and admitted that I had an eating disorder and that I had been bulimic for 42 years. I found a sisterhood of women who would love and support me in a way I had wanted my own family to. At this time, my life was completely unmanageable and I felt powerless, hopeless, and I didn't believe that I could recover from my eating disorder. From the outside, my life appeared all together and successful. I had raised 4 happy and healthy grown children, but I was not happy. I got a sponsor right away, found sober supports, worked the steps, and now knew I was ready to surrender. I knew it would take hard work and discipline. I stopped purging right away. I had to find a nutritionist and learn how to eat all over again. After I completed the 12 steps, I started sponsoring right away. I loved it and committed to other service work. I ran an EDA workshop 3 years ago. It was a real eye-opener. I went back to school and became an addiction counselor. Today, I live very simply. All of the drama and chaos are gone. Most of my friends are in the program. I am retired now and do a lot of babysitting. I discovered that I am an artist and I sell original collages that I love making. Today, I am a work in progress. I have the ability to use my voice and can express myself through all my emotions. My higher power is my co-pilot. Balance is key. The hallmark of recovery, the steps are the key to freedom. I have learned to trust myself and others. I have lost my desire for perfection. I can enjoy food today. Being of service is my life's work. I'm still being restored to sanity through the steps and the fellowship. I believe anyone can recover from an eating disorder. I have learned in Eating Disorders Anonymous that recovery is a journey. Recovery from an eating disorder is not quick or easy. Beginning something new takes time, discipline, willingness, and commitment. With my eating disorder, I had to be willing to do the basics on a daily basis. Going to meetings, working with my sponsor, doing the steps, praying and meditating, and doing service work. I searched within myself while working the 12 steps, took guidance and inspiration from my sponsor and sober supports, and listened to those who had come before me. As I began to heal, I found a greater feeling of love, appreciation, and gratitude for myself and my life, as well as for everyone and everything around me. My understanding of life led me to become more empathetic toward myself and others. I no longer felt that I would slip back into the insanity I once lived with. Having struggled with my eating disorder for so many years, getting involved in EDA had changed my life forever, given me a sense of purpose, and allowed me to live my life fully. I am in deep gratitude and so blessed to have found a solution. It was finding EDA and the unconditional love and support I received that allowed me to open up and tell my story. Only then did I find balance in my life, which gave me the peace and freedom that I was always looking for. Thank you.
Wow. Quite a life you've had.
Yes.
A professional tennis circuit, I bet a lot of people would think that was the height of glamour and success. And it sounds like you were pretty unhappy.
Yes, I was.
Now, if I'm doing the math right, you have 4 children and 4 stepchildren. Is that right?
Yes.
And have you maintained relationships with all 8 children?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
That's quite amazing. I bet you have a bunch of grandchildren.
Yeah, well, I don't have any yet, but there are some grandchildren on the way.
In the hopper, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, what's your relationship like with your children now that you're living?
Well, I see 3 of them usually every week or other week. And I have a son that lives in Hawaii, so he's far away. And we spend time together, usually going out for dinner, going to the park, or just sitting and chatting about life and what's going on in their lives.
Lovely. How has recovery changed your relationship with your children?
Well, I used to be very nervous and anxious around them because I knew that they knew my history. And I had so much shame and guilt about what I wasn't doing for them when I was supposed to be present as they were children. Today, though, in my healing, I feel much more confident and my self-esteem is much better. So I feel that we are pretty much on equal foot. I don't feel less than like I used to, and I don't feel inadequate as a mother.
Beautiful. When you went into treatment, they gave you a food plan, I believe you said.
Yes.
Are you still on that food plan, or do you eat when you're hungry, stop when you're moderately full? How has your eating changed?
Well, I'm not on the same food plan. I'm much more flexible now. I, eat 3 meals a day and have some snacks, but I eat when I'm hungry and stop when I'm moderately full. And I eat whatever foods I want. There are no foods now that I don't eat as a result of my eating disorder.
And do you still play tennis? Had to ask.
Yes, I do. I play a couple times a week, but
Okay.
for fun now.
For fun. All right.
We hope you enjoyed today's workshop. More information about Eating Disorders Anonymous can be found at 4eda.org, the number 4eda.org. The handouts for this workshop can be found at edahopeforrecovery.com. We encourage you to check out one or more of the many EDA Zoom or in-person meetings. Many of us have found recovery from our eating disorders in these meetings and hope that you will too. Until next time.